Member McGovern, and like Chairman Brady, I want to thank you, too, for your many good years of service to this institution. Let me start by saying that I oppose the bill. Last December, we sat in these two chairs to debate the Republicans' massive unpaid-for tax bill. A year later, we're back to alter it. A year ago, Democrats and independent experts warned that the so-called tax reform plan that is heavily skewed to benefit the wealthy and large corporations would not necessarily enhance our economy, and it would portend great damage for important programs like Medicare and Social Security. So now the writing's on the wall. Republicans, including President Trump's chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, have already called for new cuts to Medicare and Social Security. Republicans seem only to care about tax cuts for the wealthy, big corporations, even if that means cuts to vital programs for American families. Last year, the GOP crafted this tax bill behind closed doors and hastily passed it without a single hearing. That's contrary to what Mr. Rostenkowski, Speaker O'Neill, and President Reagan did. And because of that rushed process, there are a tremendous number of problems with the law which we called out at the time. Now, a year later, Republicans are back rushing through another package that doubles down on the original law's skewed benefits for the wealthy. This without a single hearing on the merits of these changes. There are many proposals in this legislation that I indeed do support. We should have been notified as to when this was going to happen, how it was going to happen, and what the procedures were in the run-up to this vote. A rushed and lopsided process resulted in an ill-considered tax law, and now our Republican friends want to duplicate that process with these changes. It's critical that the Ways and Means Committee return to the regular order. And one of the priorities for the next Congress will be to have oversight hearings on this tax law. Before making any changes, we'll examine each fix thoroughly, whether it is substantive or technical. That's how I think that we can avoid many of the kinds of problems that we're witnessing today. Another reason I oppose this bill is because of the disaster provisions. 2 months ago, when the Ways and Means Committee marked up so-called Tax Reform 2.0, we offered an amendment to ensure that the victims of natural disasters nationwide would be eligible for disaster tax relief regardless of where their communities were located or who their members of Congress might happen to be. Unfortunately, because of opposition to that amendment, it failed. Now, while I'm pleased today that this bill does include relief to victims of some of the most recent disasters our nation has endured, I disagree with the approach taken by our Republican colleagues here. Since Tax Reform 2.0 markup, there have been more than 13 disasters nationwide. Today's bill only provides relief to a fraction of the Americans who have suffered through these tragedies. The survivors of disasters shouldn't have to beg Congress for the next relief in the darkest hours of their lives. This, indeed, is the national principle. We should not turn our backs on our fellow Americans who need help the most. We should provide a path for them to get back on their feet. I'm also opposing this legislation because it's not offset. For the third time this year, Republicans are asking for a significant change to the tax law without paying for any of it. In fact, and egregiously, is, in my judgment, an act of fiscal malpractice. The GOP actually removed bipartisan efforts from the retirement section of this legislation. And I know this is a place where we could have found common ground. Today's bill once again demonstrates that Republicans are not the party of fiscal conservatism. And let me conclude, though, on a high note. The bill being considered today does include one package of provisions that is bipartisan and bicameral. Chairman Brady noted it, the IRS redesign provisions known as the Taxpayer First Act. The IRS package is a model as to how this entire process should have taken place. The Oversight Subcommittee, led by Chairman Jenkins and Ranking Member Lewis, have worked together openly and tirelessly on IRS redesign provisions this entire year. In March, Chairman Jenkins and Ranking Member Lewis released the discussion draft of the Taxpayer First Act, soliciting comments from stakeholders. In mid-April, the Ways and Means Committee marked up and passed the legislation. The House then considered and passed the Taxpayer First Act about a week later with a vote of 414-0. The House then began discussions with the Senate on ways to combine this bill and other IRS-related Senate bills. This was a collaborative process that resulted in a collaborative product, which included priorities of the House, the Senate, Democrats, and Republicans. It's a shame that the entire bill before us today was not constructed in a similar manner. For these reasons, I plan to oppose the bill on the floor later this week. Thank you again for the invitation here today. And, Mr. Chairman, I beg your indulgence. The Democrats are picking their leadership team.